Today's episode is brought to you by Fizzle, because sometimes being a business owner feels like bare naked bravery. Fizzle provides new entrepreneurs with a wealth of honest online business training and a community of fellow entrepreneurs who won't let you quit. You're listening to Bare Naked Bravery, a weekly podcast hosted by me, Emily Ann Peterson. This is the place where we expose the threads of heroism that stitch together the stories we admire most. As a musician, singer-songwriter, author, teaching artist, and business owner, I encounter some really fascinating stories. Every episode you'll hear features a revealing conversation with someone who courageously pours themselves out into the world. We'll talk about fears befriended, the terrors battled, and the courage created along our stories of bravery, quiet heroism, and all-out gutsiness. We open the Pandora's box of the dream-crushing constraints we all face during significant moments of bravery. These moments of bare naked bravery are rarely censored in real life, so if you're listening with little ears nearby, please know that some episodes may contain mature language and subject matter. The questions I ask today aren't scripted because I'm just curious. What is bravery? My hope for us all is that by listening to others search for and find their bravery, we will find our own. For that is what we need most, to know that we are not alone. The best way you can support the show is to share it with a friend or two. Send them an email, text, or tweet. Tag them in one of my Instagram posts. My handle's Emily Ann Pete. Or leave us a review on iTunes. It takes seconds and can be done from your phone right now. Bottom line, we need more bravery in the world. So let's be brave together. Adina Coomber joins us today from Perth, Australia. Now, she'll do a really great introduction of who and what she is here in a second, but I just have to say that one of my favorite parts of today's conversation about bravery is just how clearly Adina portrays her experience. The roller coaster she's been on is thrilling, and even that word seems like really understated, and I think she'd agree with me on that fact. Today you get to hear us talk about redefining what it means to be a hero, especially as it pertains to living in a brand new country. She and I also talk about our foolish desires and how stating them clearly out loud finds a new strength in ourselves. We also talk about how imagination and intuition play a role in attaining our brave desires. And we talk also at the end a little bit about how our physical bodies can display our feats of bravery, whether we like them to or not. So with that, I am honored to introduce you to Adina Coomber. So Adina, who are you? And why are you on this show? And what do you have to say about bravery?
Wow, who am I? That is a tough question sometimes.
I know.
But I can definitely say that I'm Adina. I'm female. I'm Mexican-American, originally from San Jose, California. And I spent most of my childhood also in Orlando, Florida. I'm an American expat. I live in Australia now. Funny enough, I live in Perth, which is one of the most, I think it is the most remote capital city in the world. It's in the middle of nowhere. If you look at a map, there's like a city and then nothing for like half a country.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It feels like a modern Wild West. So
wild.
Yeah, it is. I'm a consultant. I own a company named Red Windmill Solutions, and we're a human-focused business transformation and management strategy consultancy for small business, non-for-profit, basically all the non-enterprise corporate companies. We just don't focus on them at all. And our three main principles are that culture drives everything in life. So whether that's business strategy or the decisions that you make on a daily basis, whatever. Culture drives everything. We also believe that knowledge is empowerment, and that empowerment means clients who have barrier breaking projects. And I believe that in life as well, that if you give people knowledge, they'll do some amazing things with that knowledge. They just won't stay the same. And we also believe that smaller business is unique. So there is something outside the box, but that still needs to be managed in its own way.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the fact that if knowledge is truly learned and truly acquired by someone, then it really does change that person.
I absolutely think so. It opens up your eyes. Yes. And even traveling around the world and of course, living in another country and having a relationship now. My boyfriend is actually fresh from Ireland. So it's like, it's definitely, it changes your perspective forever. Like you just cannot go back to the way it used to be. And it really creates a hunger for what's next. What else is different? What other stories are out there? So I'm sure that's why you do your podcast as well about bravery.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think that when we share our stories of bravery, it reminds people that they are not alone in, first of all, not feeling like they're brave.
Yeah.
But also the bravery that I'm talking about here is not like the jumping into a burning building to save someone, but it's the everyday kind of bravery. And I think the knowledge or allowing knowledge to change you is part of that bravery.
Absolutely. And I think you asked me what I think about bravery or what does it mean to me. And it's, it means exactly that. It's every day. I started when I was about, I want to say 19 or 20. And I could probably go back before then, but the idea was that taking all those little steps, so just taking a step every day brought me on my journey. It was like just one day I decided that I was just going to do things that I was scared of on a daily basis. So,
wait, which day? Go back. Lead us up to that point.
Well, I mean, I grew up in, I would say, a typical lower middle class, lower to low, like poor to lower middle class family, divorced parents. I would say, honestly, the average American story these days. So custody battle, two parents, the split custody, the constant bickering, the stuff like that. And then on top of that, I was an awkward kid. I was painfully shy, like painfully shy. And I was a typical, I would say, Mexican girl as well, where I was just chubby as well. I was a chubby kid. My family, you know, it's a culture thing to feed your kids a lot because you want them to be strong. And that's what I got. So obviously going into middle school, it was a little bit scary. And I always kind of hid behind being, I want to say, more punk rock or more hippie and what have you. But when I ended up leaving high school and I was in a relationship, I found myself just like wondering why I couldn't be these other things. Like I found myself feeling stuck. And one day I just decided, you know what, I'm just going to, I'm trying to think of what the exact day was. I want to say it was going on a job interview for a mortgage broker position. And I was so nervous because, you know, what did I know about any of that? Like, other than having my license and what I knew from books. But when it came to the culture and how to act, I knew nothing. I didn't know any bankers. I didn't know anybody in that kind of position or even higher level position whatsoever. And I was so nervous that when I was buying my interview clothes, that I just told myself, you know what, just tomorrow pretend you're someone else. Like just pretend it's an acting gig or something like that. And just act like what you think you're supposed to be. And that will at least cut through the fear. And when I did it, I realized...
Where did that idea come from?
I don't know. Honestly, I want to say that I took like a semester of drama or something. And I thought it was interesting, this idea of being someone else just for a moment and having to think like them, feel like them, have a little backstory, something. And I found it to be releasing, like it was a release. So when I ended up doing that, it just broke through a bunch of stuff. It really gave me that extra push to have that confidence. And from there, I started using it when I was at the gym. If I was scared of the gym, then I would go there. So my fitness skyrocketed, which is another story.
When you went to the gym, you would pretend you were someone else.
If I was nervous, I would just kind of pretend I'm someone else. Like I'm supposed to be here and I'm that person. Even though inside I felt like I shouldn't be there. Like I shouldn't be doing it. That's not me, you know. So it definitely, like I said, it gave me that confidence. And I kept doing that. So I ended up having a nice career in finance when I was in the States. I put myself through uni. I worked full time college. I worked full time and I went to school full time, and I ended up getting a merit scholarship at Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida, which is, they're known for Mr. Rogers, but it's a really good school. Basically, it's a private school. They are aspiring to be the next like Southern Ivy League, stuff like that. But it was the same thing though. Writing that essay, I was like, nope, this is where I belong. I am that person. Even though inside I was absolutely terrified that they wouldn't accept me. Like, why would they want me? I'm not a genius, but I'm not dumb. And then leading into moving to Australia, it was the same thing. It was taking that.
When did you move to Australia, and how did that happen?
I actually left my job, I want to say 6 years ago on the 10th. It was 2000, let's see here. It was 2010, and the crash had hit pretty severely.
Yeah.
I was actually doing consulting at a law firm at the time in contracts, and I've made great money. I was doing better than most of my friends. Florida had an unemployment rate of about, I don't know, I think it was about a quarter or something like that. So it was just massive. Everybody I knew, their careers had just been demolished. And I was supposed to move to Tampa, so it's an hour from Orlando, to open up a new office. And I had actually started going there, and I was supposed to move. And one day I sat down and I did the math, and I figured out that it would cost me the same to set up a household in Tampa as it would for me to move to Australia.
Yeah.
I was like, so if the moving costs are the same, I said, then the only problem then is not knowing anyone and having to find a job. And I was like, well, their economy is booming. So, I'll give myself 6 months savings, so 6 months to live off of. And I'm like, if I can't find a job in 6 months, then I really shouldn't be doing this. Like, if I can't find anything to support myself, then there's something wrong.
No, wait, where did the idea of Australia come from? Was it just out of the blue?
No, my ex is actually Australian.
Oh, okay.
I have an ex-husband, and he and I had both gotten visas for each other's countries. So I decided that when we split, I decided that it was time to go. And that was nice, actually. It was a great decision that I made as well. And obviously there was more bravery that had to come into being into a new culture. And because when we look at things on TV, it doesn't seem like it's such a big deal, but we forget that every region has its own backstory. They have their own version of what the hero is and who founded their countries and what they were like and stuff like that. And that really starts to permeate into the society and how they identify themselves.
Yeah.
So
now I have a question. How would you define the difference of a hero in the US versus a hero in Perth?
Oh, this is going to be hard because I actually, in college, I studied international affairs, which has a major focus on anthropology. And part of that is we learned a lot about American culture and what we consider the hero in American culture. If you ever have a moment or lots of moments, read a book called Gunfighter Nation, and it kind of goes through the whole American hero myth, basically. So what we see is like the Lone Ranger kind of, who's just on a journey alone, doing whatever they can. They kind of fall into situations. I'd say in Australia, in general, it's somebody who works hard and gives it a go is the way they describe it. And they feel that the person who sits on top ensures that everybody has a fair go as well. So not only do they establish something, but they make sure that the community can thrive off of that. So I would say where we are very lonerish, Australians are very community oriented. And I think that's a carryover from the Commonwealth in general, is this idea of, we're in it together, we're somehow connected, we've been through a lot in our history, and this is how it goes. And in Perth, I think Perth is, it being the new West, it's difficult to describe what the new hero is here. I really think that it's the new comfort is basically coming out here, being able to make your money in the resources section or what have you, and then settle down with the family. Perth has grown from about 100,000 people, so over the last like 10 years, I hear, to I think about 1.5 million. So there's been just a massive growth in the whole city, and it's started out as like almost like a town, and now it's starting to become like a small city. And most of the people, if you walk down the street, they're not from Australia, let alone Western Australia. They're from Ireland, the UK, South Africa. There's more and more Chileans that are coming here now as well. There's a fair bit of Americans, believe it or not, because we already have oil and gas in the States. So they come over with the oil and gas companies. And I would say those would be the major points. And then we have an influx of Sudanese as well, and Malaysian, Indonesian, because we're just right next to Indonesia. So yeah, it's
Do you find that with such a rich palette of culture in Perth, that definition of hero is kind of
changing, maybe?
Yeah.
I do think so. I think that they're starting to establish who they are. So what their culture is. Traditionally, the rest of Australia looks at Perth and they go, oh, they just have no culture. And I look at it and I see that it's a whole lot of people who are fresh from somewhere else trying to establish who they are in this new place. And if I could say that there's a new hero, it's probably going to be the person that walks amongst everyone. And I say that because it's known for being very cliquey. And that goes with, if you're in a new place, you're going to gravitate towards your own people. And that just seems to happen here a lot. I think it's more of a safety thing. Just as animals, we're just like used to like, okay, well, if you're the same as me, then, we're okay or something. And that understanding as well in a sea of other people, other cultures.
Right.
So it's probably the person that can be amongst everyone and still be really open. And that seems to be difficult out here at the moment anyway. But of course, as a city grows, people get to be a little bit more trusting.
So when you moved out to Australia in like 2010, you said, ish?
Yeah.
When you moved out to Australia, how did you find that new sense of normal? Or how did you experience that new heroism in yourself?
I actually started in Melbourne, of all places. A friend of mine and I moved out together, and we're both moving from Orlando.
Mm.
So Melbourne is the fashion capital and the arts capital of Australia. So if you could take almost the sister city of San Francisco, it's very similar to San Francisco. Cafe culture, kind of laid back, arts, music, fashion. I didn't find it that difficult for me to fit in Melbourne. I found the sports fanaticism to be entertaining. I think it's something that's fallen out of favor in the States, is having this, this sports fanaticism. And in Melbourne, it's everybody. It's from, I hate to use this word because it's I just hate the label hipster, but from hipster to anybody really, sports is this family and friends and everything kind of event. So
yeah, I mean, I grew up in the South, and I went to school in Texas, so I'm fully, I have drunk that Kool-Aid of, it's great.
It is, you know what, coming from where I was, where, a lot of people, I mean, obviously Orlando has, massive sports teams around, and we have like 3 stadiums, even though we don't have our own football team and, stuff like that. But it was always something that was kind of out of my grasp or something. It was like, it was there. I would participate. It was nice, but it wasn't everybody. Like, as a matter of fact, 3 years ago, their version of what the Super Bowl would be is the AFL Grand Final, which was actually last weekend. They made that in Melbourne a public holiday.
That's fantastic.
And as a matter of fact, Melbourne Cup Day, which is the big horse day, is a public holiday as well. So it's just like it's surrounded by that, and it's just how they feel. So that was a little bit difficult to wrap my head around, but I really enjoyed it. One of the downturns that I found in culture was the idea of the tall poppy syndrome, where I think Americans were really competitive, and we find that to be almost a way of including people. Like, okay, come on, between our banter, just the way we do things. We one up each other. We talk loud. We go, oh, I got a better story than that. Stuff like that.
Well, and there's also I've heard this from many Australians that the tall poppy syndrome is very much a thing. So how would you describe it for someone who's just now hearing about it?
I would describe it as it's almost considered, it's like being in school again, to be honest. I don't remember there being much competitiveness in school when it came to academics. It's like being that kid that's like the teacher's pet, that's like, oh God, I know the answer. And everybody's looking at you like, why you got to be like that, And they definitely, especially if it works well for you, then there is that sense of like, what makes you so special? I think culturally they're going through a little bit of a change now, a transition, because they are recognizing that stuff like that holds back industry. So there's this massive push to make sure that industry is where it needs to be so that they're prepared in the next 10 years for all the technology that's going to come through and make some of these older trades or jobs redundant and ensure that these people have taken the steps to be prepared for what's going to happen. But I don't think it was so bad in Melbourne. Moving to Perth, it was definitely like it pushed me to start my own company, to be honest. I didn't cope well, if that's what you're trying to ask. I did not cope. Right.
I mean, okay, so going to a city where tall poppy syndrome is really strong and infiltrates the culture, to start your own business is like the definition of tall poppy.
Yeah, it definitely was. They'll give you a congratulations if you pull it off, but while you're doing it, they're like, you're wasting your time, you're doing this, you're doing that. I'm just like, I think the idea is that what I ended up doing is sitting down and thinking, is this a trait that I want to lose? And ultimately it wasn't. I like being that person. And if it means that I'm super American, I don't really care because I like it. It allows me to do amazing things in life, to push myself and to do what I think is right, to be efficient, to make sure, everything is kind of taken care of, to make sure that there isn't a too hard bin, that you're just kind of going at it, with full force, whatever that might be, and understand that it may be stressful for a little bit, but everything is temporary. I mean, our bodies are amazing at making sure that they're kind of at that homeostasis. And so any kind of stressful situation, it will fix itself eventually.
It takes some really clear insight to highlight a characteristic of yourself and not only say that you like it, but to say that you're going to do it anyways, or be that way anyways, regardless of your environment.
Yeah, it was definitely, I remember feeling horrible about it for a little bit, like, oh, why can't I just, like, almost like that kid in middle school, like, why can't I just listen to other people? And ultimately, I found that there are people who are like that are weird and don't listen to other people, or, are just bullish about what they want or what they believe in. And they end up doing really, really well in life. So why wouldn't, perhaps it wasn't my place. Maybe that's not where I belonged. And maybe I belong doing something that really allows me to hone that skill rather than get rid of it.
I just wrote down the phrase foolish desires. And as a songwriter, I'm always writing down like word combinations that I just really like, just in general. But how has those foolish desires to be your own boss and start your own business, how has that affected you as a person? And how has that changed your life?
Oh gosh. It's everything that you hear and more. Like, that's probably the soundbite, I suppose. Everything that I feel like I've over the last 2 years, it's been such a transition period that I'm now coming out of, which is lovely. But I'm just trying to think of it. I've lost a fair few friends, so that part is true. Tick that off the list. And there's not even like a fight. It's not even anything like that. It's just one day, like, you just kind of stop talking to each other because you're just doing something different than they are.
Yeah.
And it really is a test of what that friendship, what it's really founded upon when that happens, and whether or not they can support you in that situation or what have you. I would say that I feel like a much, much stronger person now, being not just alone in situations, but also with other people. I feel like I connect better, funny enough. Like, even though I've lost friends, I connect with new people so freely. And I think that what happens is you start to be like, no, you know what? My needs, my opinions, my visions, my whatever, they're absolutely valid. If somebody doesn't agree with them, that's fine. But what I want is what I want. Like, I've sat down and I've thought about it and I've really worked hard for it. And that's what I want. I think the funniest thing that's happened to me, though, is now that I'm coming out of this time of transition and really building my company and looking at a financial model that's going to build it to probably a few $1 million over the next 2 years, if not more. I say a few $1 million being conservative, but the forecasts look fairly nice, actually. I'm not a materialistic person at all. I'm like the definition of eclectic. My house is old. The house that I live in Perth is old. It's about 100 years old. I like having a big yard that's kind of messy, not messy, but like not perfectly manicured. I like that naturalness. I like seeing people in just their regular stage. I like going to the pub more than I like going to like a fancy cocktail bar. Don't get me wrong, I love fancy cocktails and I love going into those situations, but I would prefer down home to pretentious any day. And yet I want a brand new Mercedes now. I keep telling my boyfriend, I'm like, you know what? I want it to be painted one of those like horrific, like electric blue or like that lime green pearlized something. I want the most obnoxious vehicle ever, because I just feel like I've been working so hard that I just want something that I can get into on a regular basis. And then just like, be like, yeah. And what?
It's like the embodiment of the tall poppy.
It is, absolutely. Like, I'm owning it. Like, you have no idea how hard I've worked, how many nights I've cried. Like, my fitness was out the window and I'm just now getting that back. But yeah, I just want to just go for it, you know, and just be like, and it doesn't have to be all the time. I'll probably share the car and make it a corporate car or something like that, so everybody else has access to it. But it is so not me. Like, I'm like, it's just not, I'm very much like that. Well, be smart with your money, use it to travel, do this. There are better ways to spend that are just more responsible and less materialistic. And I'm just like, nope, that's what I want. Is a flashy Mercedes.
I just think, well, so it's not surprising that it would be something that you would want, that would be a foolish desire of yours, especially because it takes some serious guts to say even just the phrase a few million.
It's taken me about, I want to say, a year. Yeah, probably about a year 6 months to a year to be comfortable with saying that and saying, I want to have a company that's worth at least this much. And that's what I'm going to build it to. And really tell that to other people, because in the beginning, you do kind of get this reaction like, yeah, you're not going to do that, you know, or, ugh, you know, like it's like a look of contempt. I don't even think they understand where that comes from. And I would say it's the same in the States, to be quite honest. Like, it's not, that's not something that's just in one place. And perhaps it's because most people don't understand what kind of work that requires. I think what they hear are the overnight success stories. And I can tell you, I haven't found an overnight success story that's really an overnight success story. I would say they just found the right combination one day and then things worked out. But it could have been however long before that they.
Well, I think it's fascinating, like somebody who, it's almost like a noble few million if it surprises you, or if it comes across, at least in the States, if it comes across to everyone else that you like were surprised by the success of whatever business you start.
Yeah.
But to say, this is my goal, I am going to get there. This is how.
And it's taken time though. So it's taken a lot of people. I remember when I first told one of my friends who has a successful business in a niche market, funny enough, she and her brother started a business about 11 years ago where they do time-lapse films of construction sites. Cool. And so they film for 2 years, however long it takes for these, high rises to go up. And then from there, they compose a film or whatever the company wants with that footage. That's what they do. So they make a tailored piece. So the average person on the street, you're like, okay, you want to do what? But it has applications. And the idea was to find where those applications were. And it took her a few years, I think, to make it into a full-time job and really find their feet. And when I first told her that I want to do consulting and project management for small business, the first thing she asked me was like, how are you going to make money doing that? And I was like, well, I'm not particularly worried about making a killing necessarily. I just want to do something that I think is missing and that should be offered to small business. I said, it's not fair that really large companies or people with large budgets are able to get the KPMGs, to get the Deloittes, to get the PwCs of the world to help them out, which in my experience it's either hit or miss. It seems like their model is based on getting more and more contracts within those companies as opposed to just focusing on what's in front of them, getting it done, and then moving on. And so I think it scares a lot of small businesses. And I was like, well, I know a bunch of really talented consultants that would be happy to provide their services. And I know that's what I do. It's something that I love. I said that it's not going to be anything particularly complicated either most of the time. So you're not like reinventing the wheel every single time. There's no reason why this shouldn't work out. And so over the last couple of years, I've gone from a basic conception of what that's going to look like distilled into, I'm actually finishing up the revamp of my website now. If you look at it now, it's a little bit off, but it'll be done by the end of the week anyway. But that's included having public pricing. So just flat pricing of what people can expect to pay. So a small business can, and when I say small business, I mean, again, anything under that corporate enterprise. So anything that falls below that. So that's medium-sized businesses, independent companies, non-for-profit, local government, whatever.
It's no secret that I offer mentorship to creatives, entrepreneurs, and other folks looking to build their bravery. But when a business owner is simply in need of some really straightforward training and camaraderie, I send them to the guys at Fizzle. Fizzle is an online membership site which helps entrepreneurs grow their business, revenue, and fulfillment until they're crackling with creativity, impact, potential, and purpose. Now, there are two definitions of the word fizzle. Did you know? The first is to fail in a weak and disappointing way, which is actually what most businesses end up doing. But the second definition is to buzz or crackle like an exposed electrical wire. And you know what? You wouldn't hear all that buzzing or crackling and fizzling if there weren't an intense amount of energy or potential in those wires. The Fizzle community exists because, number one, it's hard to build a good online business. Most ideas fizzle out. And number two, for the entrepreneurial type like myself, there's a lot of energy and potential running through the wires. Everyone inside Fizzle is putting their butt on the line to build something they care about. And when you own a business, it's natural to hit roadblocks, lose steam, search for direction. But Fizzle helps its members get clarity and take the very next step. They've got some really excellent courses from real experts and a community of like-minded business builders. The courses all focus on concrete, actionable steps. The community is incredible, and there's no smarmy tactics or marketing schemes, just real people building honest websites, products, and services. If you've ever worked on a project alone, you know how much of a game changer an active community makes. It's easy to join Fizzle. Your first 2 weeks are free. After that, if you choose to stick with it, membership is only $35 a month. Visit barenakedbravery.com/fizzle to get started. That's FIZZLE.
things that I define, or one of the elements of courage and bravery that I have discovered, is this like 4-part Venn diagram of intuition, analytical skills, imagination, and acknowledging your strengths. So honesty. And I see that here, that you basically had the imagination or the positive outlook enough to analyze your surroundings and intuitively choose the right area and the right people to serve.
Yeah, well, it's just what I wanted to do. And it's just something I've always been. Like, I remember being in elementary school and just random people coming to talk to me about their problems. And I just remember being a problem solver and being really strong in that. And it's just kind of made it definitely. When I started the company, the idea was, you know what, I just think this should exist. For me, it was, I couldn't figure out a reason why not. It just seems like, and the more I got into it, the more I could tell that it absolutely needed to exist. I found that there's a lot of coaches out there, and there's a lot of people who offer like acceleration programs, workshops, stuff like that, but nobody who's sitting there saying, we'll tell you how to do this by day, like a traditional consultant, or we'll just do it for you. So you take your pick where you want to sit in your company and how you want this to be handled, but you have options. And it partly came from me as well. I mean, I think about all the projects that I've had where if I could have just given it to somebody else, like, hey, can you run my operations? Can you set my operations up for a little bit? And then that's it. You come back, you deal with whatever you want to deal with in your company, whether it's the product or being the face of it or whatever it is. You still have an option that somebody's there that knows what they're doing, not just from a small business aspect, but also from a larger corporate side of it as well, to come in and lay down the track of what that's going to look like. Everything else is outsourced these days, it seems like, as well, especially in that startup entrepreneurial market. Why not?
Right. Well, let's shift gears a little bit, because I know that your health has also played a role in your intuition and your choices that you've made with your business over the last couple of years. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. My fitness has definitely been an inspiration as well as a detractor every once in a while. So when I was 18, 19, I learned how to start going to the gym, and I learned how to work out. And that was after mostly a lifetime of I didn't have like an active family. My dad was a software engineer. He was actively against fitness. It felt like he would have my brother and I ride our bikes on these if anybody's in Silicon Valley and they know Sunnyvale to Shoreline, then they'd just be like, how can you send a 9-year-old biking up that? It's like a half an hour drive, which means that's like a 3-hour bike ride for like a 10-year-old, you know? So that was his idea of getting us out to play in fitness. But that idea of what that meant, what it did for your body, and what it did for your mind was not really ingrained in us. So I had problems with weight and what have you. It would kind of go up and down, but I didn't really understand it. So it always felt, and of course there's the pressures of being a teenage girl. You just want to be perfect. And at the time, being super skinny was the flavor du jour. It was that, we'll say the early 2000s, when still being like unhealthily skinny.
The Olsen twin era.
Yes, exactly. And I didn't understand what that was either. Like, I didn't really know what any of that meant. I just knew that I was supposed to look a certain way, and I didn't know how to get there. So when I was about 18, I started going to the gym. I got fairly fit. I was weightlifting. When I look back now, I don't think I realized how fit I really was. Like, I still had that ideal in my head of, having to be this tiny thing. And if you're lifting weights, and just not every body is the same. And I've got a short, squat body that packs on muscle really quickly. So it's just like, it's been actually a continuing fact. It's only been in the last year and a half that I've been able to accept that as well. Like, I'm never going to be super tiny because my body just will not allow it. I'll be tiny, but not wayfish. It's just not going to happen. But it was definitely an eye-opener when I was able to do that. I was in a marriage that just was not for me. It didn't fit me. The relationship and the lifestyle that we had was not something that I was happy with. And during that time, I gained about, I want to say 60 pounds, something like that. I'm only 5'3", and at my height, I think I was at 170 pounds, which was not morbidly obese, but still getting to that point of you're starting to lose any kind of shape and your health and what have you. My big eye opener was I actually took a modern dance class as an elective when I was leaving junior college, and I couldn't do things. I'd never been able not to be, fairly flexible or keep my balance or anything like that. And of course, this had been 5 years since I had been a regular gym goer, and it just shocked me. I couldn't believe it. I was just like, this is crazy. And it was that idea of like, I should be able to do these things. I can't not do these things. So that kicked off the early part of the fitness, and I got myself back down to a manageable weight. About 5 years ago, though, I started, again, it was realizing that I was not fearful of being fit, but fearful of other people. So I wanted to run. I was a terrible runner. I couldn't run more than 2 minutes tops, and then I was dying. Like that was just like what would be a jog for someone was like my HIIT exercise. I was absolutely dragging myself. And I decided that I was going to make it work for me. No matter what, I was going to do this. There was no reason why I should be scared of something like running, like something that the human body is supposed to do, like a natural thing. My dogs aren't scared to run. Why should I be scared? And so I started running at night, and in areas that I knew nobody was going to be around. So I could huff and puff and cry and do all the things that I had to do alone, away from anyone. I didn't have to worry. And it took me about a month to really start to build myself up. But then suddenly I was running. Like it was crazy. And it wasn't really suddenly. It was just one day I realized like, oh, wow, I've just gone 3 blocks and I haven't needed to stop. And that kind of led me into a whole other world of understanding. I felt better. I was happier. It was strange the way people reacted to me afterwards as well. So it was jarring, but it was also really nice because there's two sides of starting to pay attention to yourself physically. There's the side where you feel great. People tell you look great, you're awesome, you're whatever. And then there's the other side that I'd never dealt with before, which were predatory people and going into a new office and girls making comments about you. And I'll actually touch on that in a second because I think that was a very important lesson that I learned. But what I've learned recently, though, is that you can be on top with your fitness. And as I've tried to grow this company over the last year, my fitness has definitely taken a backseat. Stress equals belly fat. I don't care who you are, stress equals belly fat. And it's just this constant trying to maintain yourself.
Well, I was even going to ask that, back in the States, when you were in that, not bad marriage, but just a marriage that wasn't for you, clearly that would have put stress on you. And then here again, just several years ago, you were under a lot more stress. And, I really do think our bodies absorb the things that ask it to endure.
And it's not just, it's funny because now I see it as a completely, now when I see that I've gained weight, I don't see it as, oh God, you're this failure. I see it as, oh my goodness, you need to take care of yourself, that you're taking in and you're holding on to, just stuff that you shouldn't be holding on to. To me, it's a sign of you're not eating properly. And so you're not eating naturally. So you're not taking care of yourself there. You're not getting the exercise that your body needs, which is definitely a release. There's a massive difference between my personality when I start training compared to when I haven't been. It's night and day. It's absolutely, it's amazing the difference, to be honest. Same with my sleep, even how I hold my breath. When you're working out, if you are really holding in your core. You're learning how to breathe properly and not panic while you're running or something like that. You learn to exhale in a way that makes you feel relaxed. And there are papers and papers and papers out there that are written that really show that correlation and show even the direct connection between your body when you're working out and your body when you're not. And I've been looking at more papers now that look at the different types of workouts and how they set your brain up into different mindsets. So almost like therapy through working out, but choose something that's going to match whatever your mood is. I remember when I was super frustrated, I started lifting. So I was doing heavy lifting because I just felt like running was too overwhelming. So I was still getting what I needed, but lifting and then a little bit of gymnastics was like, it just made me feel free. It made me feel strong and it made me feel free. This time around, it's been a focus on yoga and high intensity circuit training, which still makes me feel free, but it makes me feel more in control. And it makes me feel, I don't know, like it changes my outlook. It's like less about strength, more about just being able to run that distance or get that extra bit out of me, but in a happy kind of way, to just like let the world melt. Melt.
I love that. I love the idea of asking yourself, your personhood, what physical activity would represent your holistic needs.
Yeah.
Like if you're really frustrated at XYZ, then your body needs to practice moving large objects out of the way.
Yeah, definitely. It has been a page turner for sure for me. I think that the biggest aspect as well has just been maybe not the confidence, but seeing things from different sides. And I was going to touch on that. When I was a little bit larger and I was still in the States, I wasn't fat, but I felt attractive, and I've never had issue finding anyone or anything like that. When I was one of those, I remember specifically these girls starting that were marketing coordinators in the office, and all the other girls going, look at these girls. Like they were absolutely wonderful. They were perfect. And we just had this reaction, like there must be something wrong with them. They must be hired for their looks. They must be this, they must be that. And it was interesting being on the other side of the coin after I had gone through an even bigger fitness thing and then moving to another office and then just having girls kind of like do that little bit of a sneer to you. And I'm just like I had never experienced that in my life. And then suddenly, you hear a little bit of whispers in the hallway, or you might make a comment like, oh, I ate too much or something. They're looking at you with like the look of death. And it took me it took me some time to realize that was going on. Like it was almost shocking. It was like, wait, what? Like, what are you talking about? I remember somebody going off on me once, like, oh, you don't understand the problems of being a real woman or something like that. And me going, excuse me? Like, are you talking about me? Like, because I was still looking in the mirror, looking at, where I could have room for improvement. And it was just because I have to say, for anybody who's losing weight, it takes your mind a while to reset and figure and reposition yourself. I would say that if you're going to put yourself on a program, take pictures of yourself during that program. But once you've reached the end, so if you put it for like 6 weeks, stop. Don't take a selfie for probably a month. Don't go and pinch yourself for a little bit. You need to let your mind reset and settle into where you're at. Otherwise, you'll just get hyper-focused and you won't be able to let go, essentially. And you'll remain with that old image, that old self-image in your head, and not be able to move on and really enjoy what you've been able to do. Like you'll see your clothes getting smaller, but you won't see yourself forming into that bit. And you have to learn how to, it's almost reintroducing yourself.
Yeah, and I would even say some of my history is that I had an eating disorder in high school and up and into college. And since that point, my story with health kind of looks opposite to yours, or sounds somewhat opposite to yours, at least up until this point. So, but it still has taken a while for me to allow my visual definition of myself to match the current external version.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes a little bit of time. And the sooner that, people talk about being comfortable with yourself and just accepting who you are. And I'm all for that. But I'm also for understanding that if you look at yourself and you don't look happy, then that's really what you have to focus on. And that could be being malnourished from having an eating disorder and pushing your friends away because you don't want them to know that you have something wrong, not going out with people. I've had a couple friends who've gone through anorexia and bulimia, and they won't date anyone because what do guys want to do? Go out and drink, and, they want to do with their girlfriends. They want to have a bottle of wine or something. They want to go out to eat, and impress their girl. And if you're having problems with an eating disorder, it's like, well, how do you tell them that? You don't want to let yourself, be known by pushing your food around, but you also, it becomes a stressful situation.
Well, it's an enjoyment.
Yeah.
Not enjoying yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the same. I would say it's the same on the other side with stress eating, is that you don't want to be around other people because you don't want them to see you in your state. You just don't want anybody to be close to you because you don't want them to know what you look like, or, what's really eating you up inside, or the stress that you're under. For me, it was just what triggered it was not being open about the stress that I was under building a business. And once I realized that, then I was like, oh, wow, no, you know what? I just need to tell people, like, this is where I'm at in life. Take it or leave it. I'm trying to build something. I may not be successful at it, but for me, it's more important that I try than not to. And that absolutely changed my outlook completely once I accepted that.
Yeah, that vulnerability is such a life changer.
It is. It's big. It's power through vulnerability. It's going, this is me. It's like, I think there's a yoga pose. What is it? I think it's a mountain pose where your palms are out and you're just standing up and your chest is out. And it's like, if you could see it like that, then that's basically it. Like, this is it. This is, like, and then just look at them and go, well, who are you? Like, who are you to judge anything? Like, and just be okay with, what you're doing. And accepting failure is probably a biggest part of it too, is just everybody's going to fail at something at some point. It just depends on how you look at it. If it's just not the right plan for the journey or to get to the goal, then that's not really failure. That's just a detraction or a detour. But if it's something, a decision that you have to abandon, then you've either found your limits, which is wonderful. Some people never find what their limits are, or you just decide that it's not the right thing for you, which what's wrong with that? Do you really want to do something you don't want to do anyway? So, yeah. So it's been a journey anyway.
That's what it's all about, is the journey, of course. And without being too cliche, it just truly is.
You were talking about that Venn diagram, and I think it's really, really interesting, and I love it because I think when I look at these things, I honestly look at it, I visualize just doing a bull ride or something. You're from the South, so you
yeah.
appreciate that. But that's what it is. You hop on the bull, it's going to buck you off, like, eventually. But the fun of it is staying on. Like, that's the fun, is the fear is getting up. The fun is staying on and giving it a try and just laughing while you go through it, because why not? Like, why are you putting yourself through this situation in the first place?
There are many ways to ride a bull, and the least enjoyable is being terrified.
Yeah, exactly. So
you might as well choose to enjoy it.
Just enjoy the journey. And that's probably the piece that I've been able to take with me throughout through everything that I've done. So just, I don't know if your podcast people want to hear, but I mean, I'm 31 now, so it's been a little bit of time. But whenever I forget that I should just enjoy what's happening to me in that moment, that's when things seem to be panicky or uneasy or kind of go into another direction. When I just have fun with it, have fun with the jiggly belly, like, oh shoot, this is what I look like now, and know that it helps when you accept it and you can enjoy it, that there's a way out. It's almost like going to an exhibit that's horrifying. You're like, but you're going to walk out. So you just have to take those steps. And it's the same thing with everything else. There's always a way out. There's always something else that you can do. even if it doesn't feel like there is. We live in a great society where people can't take your liberty. They can't take your life, legally anyway, I should say. But I mean, nobody's going to come in systematically and take your life, your everything away. There's always something that can be done. And there's always creative or guerrilla type measures that you can take to make sure other people understand what you're going through and what you're trying to say and what you stand for. And, in an age of social media, it's so much easier to do that than it was 10 years ago.
It's so true.
Or before.
To wrap things up for a final question, because I don't want to keep you too long.
No, you're fine.
What would you have to say to someone who just moved to a new location and they're pretty much just starting over?
I would say enjoy starting over, but it can be difficult. Make your friends in the beginning. So just try to talk to everybody. Just get involved with anything, even if it seems lame. Go to that, Dungeons and Dragons meetup or something. If anybody likes Dungeons and Dragons, I sincerely apologize. But, go to what you think would not be what you would normally do. You can always fall back on key groups as well. So there's always arts and culture, so music, arts, what have you. They usually will have some sort of strong culture. There's athleticism as well, or just being in fitness. So, find a running group, find, people who are doing stuff together. And there's always special interests or what have you. But I think the main thing to understand is that there's kind of I don't want to say a learning curve, but there's a process we all go through when we move. And that's the 90-day honeymoon period. So I don't care who you are and where you've been and where you're going. It's about 90 days. It's like falling in love. It's the first 3 months are like everything is amazing and new, and you still have piping through your system this like feeling of accomplishment or something. Between 90 days and 6 months is about the time that things get really low, because you're exhausted. You're such a sensory overload that you just want something that's normal. And that's when you kind of look back and go, you get really, really homesick, or you miss, your old friends or what have you. Preparing yourself for that time is the most important. And at 6 months is about when things feel like they've always been there. So during those last 3 months though, so from 3 to 6 months, just take it all in, basically. Understand that, no, you are new and it's okay. It's not a bad thing. And learn what you can and just try to find your place. That's all. Just keep your head up and understand that you came from somewhere. You're not lost. And that's it. That's all I really can say.
That's fantastic advice.
That's my experience anyway. Like I said, it's almost like you can mark it on the calendar. 3 months, it's like, oh, I'm going to feel shitty on this day.
Well, Adina, thank you again and again for joining us today. I am so honored to get to know you and to share you with all of my people.
Thank you. I hope it's helpful for someone.
Oh, no, it is. I know that it is.
After I stopped recording our conversation, Adina and I were commenting on the fact that other people's interpretations of our bravery will often have more to do with their own stuff than it does to do with your own stuff. It's just a whole other layer of courage to acknowledge that fact and then live it out. It's a really brave thing to do. Okay, so beyond the Bare Naked Bravery adult coloring book, which as always available for you to download from barenakedbravery.com/color, your brave takeaway from today's conversation is a tall poppy worksheet that I've whipped up. It's all about this idea of foolish desires. And sometimes I know, at least from you might not need this, but I know I need this, a little prick to let my feelings go wild and become a tall poppy. And you can download that worksheet just by going to our show notes from today, which will also have a link to the book that Adina mentioned earlier. And she and I would love to hear all about your favorite parts of today's Bare Naked Bravery episode. You can find Adina Coomber and myself on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and more. Just go ahead and tag us so she and I can cheer you on and see what you're up to. And that's our show this week. Thank you for listening. There is so much that you could be listening to today, and I do not take it lightly that you have chosen to listen to Adina and I talk about some stuff that really means a lot to us. I hope that you've gotten something out of it, and I'd also like to thank my friends at Music Box Licensing. I couldn't do without mentioning them. They are a premier creative music agency dedicated to finding and crafting unique soundtracks. They are such a great group of folks. And if you'd like to find out more about all the artists, musicians, and other sponsors of this show, just go to barenakedbravery.com/sponsors. And I am looking forward to being with you next week. We have some really great things in store for you. Until then, I have one message for you. It's this: be yourself. Be vulnerable, be imaginative, be intuitive, be brave, because the world needs more of your bare naked bravery.